Are you against gay marriage? Why? Why are you against gay marriage? Now, some of you are thinking, Kevin, you've gone off the deep end now and you're supporting gay marriage. You're not listening to me. I never said anything about it. All I asked you was if you support it, and if you're against it, and why. Why are you against it? So welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. In this video, we're going to be talking about marriage and gay marriage. But we're not talking about it specifically to talk about gay marriage. Here's what we're doing. In the past few videos, we've been looking into the epistemological basis for why we believe what we believe. What I usually deal with is something that is, I usually deal with Calvinism. And I use biblical interpretation to delve into passages for whether or not they support Calvinism. But Calvinism it can be kind of abstract because it doesn't touch everybody's life. But marriage is something that most people understand pretty well, okay? And marriage and gay marriage. And, recently in the political discourse, people are against, the whole issue of gay marriage came up in the Supreme Court. And so what I want to do is I want to take this issue of marriage, of what is marriage. It seems it's so commonplace, it's so ordinary. And I want to test our presuppositions about it. I want to test our epistemological basis for why you believe what you believe about marriage. This is an example of what you might be able to do with other concepts that you think are scriptural so that you can go back and find out what the real deal is. And gay marriage is a great opportunity to back up and ask the question, what am I really against here? If you're against gay marriage, or if you're for marriage, what are you really for? What do you think marriage is? Those are all good questions. In my last video, I mentioned something that was in Peter Boghossian's book on how to have impossible conversations, how he tested people's knowledge on something common like how does a toilet work, okay? And then after they explained through a little bit, their confidence level dropped a little bit. So I want to take that same approach now. What is your confidence level that you understand what marriage is? And then we'll talk through it a little bit, and then maybe your confidence level will change. Maybe it'll be higher at the end of this video. That'd be great. Maybe it'll be a little bit lower. But I think there's so many presuppositions built into this common thing, and I'm just picking marriage as an example of something that is common to most people that we think we know things about, and there are things that we don't think about, I think, if that makes sense. So the issue of gay marriage is very interesting to me, not because I'm interested in doing it, but because it raises up some questions, some epistemological questions about what marriage is in the first place, and not only what marriage is, but who decides what marriage is, and how, that kind of thing. When is a marriage? What does the Bible have to say about it? What is a marriage? Recently, I'm kind of from Alabama. Now, I'm from a lot of places, but I spent my adolescence in Alabama. I was a military brat, and we moved around a whole lot. My parents moved a lot when I was growing up, but I found them every time. And one of those times we moved to Alabama, and I did high school in Alabama. And then, so in Alabama, they changed the marriage laws to where now you no longer, this is just in August. I'm saying this in October of 2019, but back in August of 2019, they changed the marriage laws that came into effect to where now all you have to do is go get a sheet of paper and the people who are going to be married to each other, and you can pick husband, wife, or spouse for what you want to be. People that are going to be married to each other, fill that out, you go get it notarized, and you file it with the probate court. Now notice what's not there. They have done away with the officiating person. There doesn't have to be a minister. There doesn't have to be a judge. There doesn't have to be a ceremony. There doesn't have to be an official legal, I now pronounce you, nothing like that. Just this document registered with the probate court. So this is kind of in response to when the Supreme Court legalized gay marriage for the entire 50 states, which is anti-federalism, regardless of what you think about it, regardless of the issue of gay marriage, we don't want the federal court deciding things that aren't delegated to it. That should be something that's reserved to the states, okay? And if a state wants to decide to do something and you like that, then go to that state. The idea, I don't want to get into all that about how each state is supposed to be basically conducting its own experiment on what laws are good and bad, so you don't have to, if you get a bad law, you don't throw the whole country down the toilet, okay? So the whole states thing went out the window there. In Alabama, they're like, well, we don't want to issue, marriage certificates to homosexual couples, so we're just not going to issue any of them. We're not going to issue marriage certificates at all. Now, that raises a big question. What is marriage? Think about scripturally. And if you ask people this, now when I ask this question, I know there's a bunch of you listening out there who are throwing out answers. And that quick, rapid response reflex that you have, rather than listening to what's going to come next, is the exact reason the church is in such an epistemological mess that it's in, and that people have so many presuppositions that they don't understand. You're attached to some kind of idea. There are many people who say the marriage is a ceremony. A marriage is a formal declaration. A marriage is a legal contract. Okay, there's all kinds of ideas about what a marriage is. Well, is a marriage a wedding? Is it a ceremony? Okay, now if you're a Bible believer, are there any marriage ceremonies in the Bible? There's only 2 that I know of, for sure. There were probably wedding feasts in the Old Testament, all right? When I'm talking about weddings, I guess, wedding ceremonies, marriage ceremony, wedding ceremony. Jesus goes to a wedding in John chapter 2. That Jesus going to something is not the same thing as a command that a person has to have one, okay? There is the marriage supper of the Lamb in Revelation 19, but there's lots of controversy about what that is. It kind of just looks like a bunch of birds eating a bunch of carcasses, okay, in one sense. But there's no ceremony there. In the Old Testament, a lot of times, Rebecca goes into Isaac's tent and she became his wife, and it's as simple as that. Some people say a marriage isn't official, isn't real until it's consummated. So some people say, well, it's a contract. Well, what if you have a contract and you don't consummate the wedding, and you can annul it? You can annul the contract, right? So was that really a wedding? Was it really a marriage if they signed the contract but didn't consummate it? What if some people say you have to have the contract and all this. Well, what if the judge has to sign the contract in the state that you're in, and you get married on a Saturday and the judge isn't open until Monday? So you have the wedding on Saturday, and then you consummate the marriage on Saturday night, but the judge doesn't get the paper to sign it until Monday. Were they committing fornication? And you can be, well, of course they're not committing fornication. I understand, but think about it. There are some people who think that the signed official state document paper is what makes a marriage, is what makes a marriage legal or right or proper. Okay? If you think, now think about this, if there are people who think that the ceremony is what makes it legal, the ceremony makes it legal. Somebody, an officiating person saying, I pronounce you man and wife, or the witnesses, or the signed document in the front of your Bible, or something like that is what makes it legal. What about the Alabama thing? You go to Alabama and you can just sign a document. There is no ceremony, and you get it notarized, and you file it with the probate court. So can the state, have we outsourced what we think marriage is to the state? So there might be churches, and I don't know of any off the top of my head, but there could be churches, for example, who think that could be people, if you go to Alabama, if you're in Alabama and you get married that way, legally, then you're not really married, because marriage is a ceremony. Well, what if you get married that way? You say, well, that's married. Okay, what if they don't consummate it? Well, that's not really marriage then. Well, then you can annul it. Okay. So what is marriage? Why does the state get involved with marriage? Where does that come in? And what I'm trying to say is this. For scores and scores of years, American Christians have completely outsourced the concept of marriage to the state. We Christians don't have our own concept of marriage as far as what makes it official. We completely outsource it to the state. Many people do. So you'll have people that want to get married in a church but don't want to go file the papers. And some people are against that. Or you have people that want to go file the papers to be legally married but don't want to fool with the ceremony. Some people are against that. To the state, let me tell you what marriage is to the state. So when you oppose gay marriage, ask what you are against. To the state. Well, let's go read. Let's read a definition here from Webster. This is from 1828, Webster's 1828 dictionary, marriage. The act of uniting a man and a woman for life, wedlock, the legal union of a man and a woman for life. Marriage, now listen to this, is a contract both civil and religious, by which the parties engage to live together in mutual affection and fidelity till death shall separate them. Marriage was instituted by God himself for the purpose of preventing the promiscuous intercourse of the sexes, for promoting domestic felicity, and for securing the maintenance and education of children. Domestic felicity would be domestic happiness, okay? And for securing the maintenance and education of children. Now, if you are an evolutionist and you don't believe the Bible, you would probably say something like this. When two people get together, kids result from it. Kids are expensive and they are better raised as teams, as a team of people. So it's a nice social convention. It's a very useful social convention for the two people who are going to be producing the kids to enter into a contract so that the kids can come up in a stable environment when they are born and there will be teamwork involved, that kind of thing. So from either a religious, which I don't like that terminology, or a biblical standpoint, you have marriage being instituted by God back in Genesis. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and the twain shall be one flesh. All right, a man shall cleave unto his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. And then Jesus repeats that when he's talking about marriage in Matthew chapter 19 and some other places. So if you think God instituted marriage, you're going to do it that way. If you're an evolutionist or a practical evolutionist, maybe you would think the other way, that it's a practical benefit. Marriage is because of what two people coming together produces. Having children is a very serious result of activity, of an action. It's a very serious consequence. And so if we're going to have that consequence, we need to have a mechanism in place for dealing with that properly. And maybe you should only do that if you intend for that consequence. So that's the kind of thinking behind it. So both Bible believers and non-Bible believers would have a reasonable basis for why marriage would be a good idea, especially in light of the idea of raising kids, okay? So let me do one more definition here. If you just Google marriage definition, Google provides from, well, I guess just Google from Oxford, the legally or formally recognize the union of two people as partners in a personal relationship, historically and in some jurisdictions, specifically a union between man and a woman. Okay? So legally or formally. So in the Oxford definition, maybe you could formally, like maybe you get married in a church and the church recognizes it and it's in front of people and you sign papers and all that, but you don't go register it with the state. Are you still married? Okay? So what is marriage as far as the state is concerned? As far as the government is concerned, marriage is just a recognition of a taxation and benefit status, a legal taxation and benefit status. That's really all it is. If you're married, we can tax you this way. If you're not married, we're going to tax you this way. If you are married, you have certain legal benefit. I don't even like that word. I knew a guy in the Army years ago who used the word benefits all the time, and it was hilarious. But if you're married, if you have, for example, health care benefits, if you have health insurance, it can apply to your family, including your spouse. If you have a pension and you die, you can set things up to where legally, because they were your spouse, the pension keeps going to your spouse. So that is, as far as civil things are concerned, for the law, you would have to recognize that sort of thing. And you think about a society, especially if you back it up a little bit, we don't tend to think this way anymore, but if you have a society, you're probably going to go to war with other societies. So you want to have more people, and you want to indoctrinate them with your culture, and you want to preserve your way of life. And if you're going to beat the other people in a war, you need more people. So you want to encourage the production of people. And if you're encouraging the production of people, it is best to have people raised by teams who can afford it. So if you have a team working together, usually one of them is going to sacrifice some amount of income in order to care for the children that you're raising. And what the government does, the taxation status that recognizes as marriage, all it really does is it allows it to tax you differently so that it can incentivize you to work as a team to raise kids, maybe under a single income where you have 2 adults and multiple children, because that's hard to do and it's expensive. So we're going to let you keep some more of your money rather than tax it out of you, so that you can use it to raise the family. That's the idea. And then you get more families, you have better social bonds, you have a stronger country, you have a stronger moral fiber, and you have more people that you can send to the war to beat the other people, who hopefully don't have as many people as you, because you want to have more than they do so that you can kill them before they kill you. And just to grow the society in general. If you want more farming hands, if you want more people working in the factory, in the Industrial Revolution, you're going to have laws that promote this kind of thing. So ultimately, as far as the state is concerned, marriage is just a taxation and benefit legal status that marriage confers upon you in the eyes of the state. And that's essentially all it is as far as the state is concerned. Now, what if you have somebody who they want everything that is marriage? They want to be committed to one other person, have kids or whatever, but they don't care about the state formally recognizing them for tax purposes or anything else. Do you have to tell them to go to the state? Is it okay if the state keeps taxing them as an individual if that's what they want? Is it okay to do that? Because that's really all the state cares about. Now, there used to be moral laws and things like that. You used to actually be able to be punished for what you did in the bedroom with different people, civilly. And today we don't do that anymore. At least not in the United States, okay? Today in the United States, as long as you're with a consenting adult, you can pretty much do whatever you want to, all right? As long as you're with a consenting adult when it comes to that kind of thing. And you're not going to get legally prosecuted for it, even though in the military, you technically could, even though you probably won't, because some things are not removed from the Uniform Code of Military Justice. For example, certain intercourse positions are still against the Uniform Code of Military Justice, even among husband and wife. Now, they're not going to enforce that, but it's still on the books. But that's just, trivia, interesting things, kind of, maybe. So if you have a couple that wants to get married, but they don't care about state recognition for taxation and benefits purposes, is it within the Christian or the church's right to tell them that they have to go get that? Okay, you say, well, yes, it is. They have to go get that. Well, let's change the channel a little bit then. Let's say you're in Alabama and you still have the legal representation because that paper represents that, but let's say that something happens and they take it a step further. Let's say you're living in a state like Alabama where because of all the changes in the laws, they have decided, you know what, we're not doing marriage at all. We're not recognizing marriage. We're not doing any of it. There are no marriage certificates. If you are living with somebody, we don't care whether you're married or not. We don't recognize it. Everybody's getting taxed. You get your benefits. However, the company you get them from decides you get them. We don't care. We are out of that business. See ya. What do Christians in that state do then? What if there is no state to go to get officially married and recognized by the state? What if that happens? Now, there are places on this green earth where that's the case in the government. What if that happened where you are? What would be a marriage then? What would constitute a marriage? We get the people with the church together. Okay, what if something happens and all the church members got killed by marauders or something, and you and your esposa are the only one left? You and your betrothed are the only one left. What do you do then? I know that's an extreme scenario, but think, what is a marriage? What constitutes a marriage? What would a Christian say constitutes a marriage? Now, before you shout out all these things, you have to realize that every other Christian out there who's listening to this is shouting out a whole bunch of different things. And if you were to formalize this in some kind of church, then all the different denominations out there would formalize it in some different way and make different rules about what constitutes a honest-to-God marriage. In the Bible, flesh joining flesh, you say, let man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. Well, with no ceremonies officially there's no command to have a wedding ceremony in the Bible. There's no command to have that. There is a wedding ceremony, at least one in John chapter 2. But if God ordained marriage back in Genesis, the only thing he says is man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the twain shall be one flesh. Well, that twain being one flesh that's the man and wife right there. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, what know ye not, that he which is joined unto an harlot is one body? For two, saith he, shall be one flesh. The Apostle Paul, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, quotes God and Jesus, the two shall be one flesh, within the context of a man being joined to a harlot. So if you want to make that marriage, which it's fine if you want to. If you want to make that marriage, that's fine, go for it. But if you want to make that marriage, then anybody you've ever joined with, you've been married to in the eyes of God. And maybe that's the position you want to take. That's fine. Now, some people are against that just because of how many people it would indicate they have been married to that they never entered into a contract with. Okay? So there are some people that teach that. Flesh joining flesh constitutes a marriage in the eyes of God. If you're against gay marriage, what are you against? Some people are vitriolic, and I don't want to characterize them that way, but the idea of gays being together is so repulsive to some people that they just cannot countenance it, and they want to force their inability to countenance it on other people. And if you can't countenance something, maybe you have a good reason for it, but that's not a good reason to try to force that onto other people, I don't think. Now, what are you against? Now, let's look at the linguistically. Maybe you're against, this is one of my issues with it, maybe you're against using the word marriage because marriage has a certain definition. So if homosexuals and gays want to get together and be together, what if you call it a civil union? Are you against that being legal? Now, I'm not saying are you against that person like you wouldn't do it. You're against that being moral. Are you against it being legal? That's two different things. Am I against something being moral versus am I against it being legal? Have you thought about that? Okay? And I'm not giving you my take on this. I'm just trying to get you to think a little bit about what this is. Are you against the idea of two gays who are consenting, getting together, and doing their intimate thing? Do you think that now I know that repulses you, and you're against that morally, but are you in favor of prosecuting it legally when people do that? Do you think you should go to their house and arrest them when they do that? So what are you against? I have a problem with the redefinition of a word I don't want to lose the language. The word marriage means something. So if you want to take gay couples, and I don't know what the latest politically correct terminology is. If I'm slurring somebody by using the word gay, it's not my intent. I just, I have a job. I don't know what the latest thing is to not be categorized as a bigot. But if you just take a homosexual couple and you give them state recognized status to be taxed a certain way or to share each other's medical or pension benefits, are you against that? Or are you against the word marriage being applied to it? You see? Are you against them having that legal status? What if they had that legal status, which was effectively the same as married people, but you just didn't call it marriage? Okay? Because that's not what the word means. What are you against? Are you against them getting a license? Are you against them having a ceremony? Are you against flesh joining flesh? And then when you say whether you're for or against all these things, are you for or against it morally, or are you for or against it legally? Okay? Now, arguments and debates could fly in all kinds of directions about this kind of stuff. What is a marriage? Most of the definitions include a lifelong commitment. Over in the Middle East, I understand third hand. I don't have first-hand knowledge on this, but I understand third hand, but that there are places that you can go to that are essentially brothels. Go pick out a woman, and what you're going to do with that woman is you're going to have some kind of, intercourse or intimacy, that kind of physical intimacy for a certain period of time, and you're going to stop. It's just like prostitution. But before the intimacy or the intercourse starts, you legally get married. And then you do the intercourse, and then you legally either get annulled or divorced. I'm not sure which it is. So, is that really... when you get legalistically minded, those people might actually think that they're being legal, moral, law-abiding citizens and doing morally right thing by going... they're just having promiscuous sex, but they're putting some kind of legal stamp on it, and does that make it not promiscuous? That's the kind of thing that Jesus was dealing with. He said, when a man shall put away his wife and shall marry another, that and shall marry another is tying the two together. It's not just the idea that anybody would ever put away their wife. It's putting away your wife and marry another, people would be wife swapping. Hey, Jim, my wife, I'm kind of bored with my wife. How about let's divorce our wives and let's swap them for a week. We'll marry each other's wives. That'll make it legal. And then we'll divorce again, swap back, get our own wife back, Just do a little wife swapping. That kind of thing was going on. And that's why they had to put a strict prohibition against taking back the wife that you put away, because people would divorce them and then take them back. It's just legal wife swapping. They're just signing papers as they do all this, signing papers as they're doing the swinging, pretty much. So now we get into the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. If you're going to a brothel and legally getting married to the prostitute and then legally getting divorced afterwards, that is completely away from the spirit of the law. But you're following the letter of the law. So does something being legal make it right? If the government is saying, here's what marriage is, if it happens to coincide with what we Christians think marriage is, for so long, we make the mistake of starting to outsource what we think marriage is to the state. Now all of a sudden, the state turns around and says, well, now two gay people coming together in union is also matrimony. That is also marriage. You say, well, that's not right. That's not marriage. That's not even the definition of the word. If you want to have the legal status or whatever, I get that, but it's not marriage, because marriage is a word that has a definition, and that's not it. So what are we talking about here? So now, can you trust the government when it tells you what marriage is and it happens to be something that is not marriage? So the government doesn't know what marriage is. The government is calling something marriage that is not marriage. So does that mean that when the government calls something marriage that is marriage, it's okay at that point to outsource our sense of meaning about that concept to the government? Should we have been doing that in the first place? And I think the whole idea of legalizing gay marriage brings to the surface the fact that Christians have not been thinking about why they believe what they believe, and we have been outsourcing our sense, our concept of words and Christian concepts, things that we say and believe. God instituted marriage, right? We say we believe that, but we have completely outsourced that to the government. Why have we done that? And then when the government turns and changes the definition on it to make it something else, now what do? Does a marriage certificate mean anything anymore if the person issuing it issues it to things that aren't marriage? Does it? Just something to think about. It was like if Nazi Germany in the 1940s decides that killing Jews is not murder, does that mean it's morally right to now kill Jews? It's legal, but is it right and correct? No. So would you outsource what is murder to the government for them to tell you? No, you wouldn't want to do that. Not in that case. And that's a case, okay, and what about the unborn? Okay, that's another issue right there. Just like the Nazis decided that Jews weren't legally people, some people have decided, some states and other things and countries have decided that the unborn are not legally people and that you can kill them. Does that mean it's morally right to do so? And I'm using this as an example of when a government says something is legal, that does not mean the government is right. What that means further is that you have to know what's right despite what the government says. Now let's take it a step further. Despite what the government says, what about despite what Brother Melms says? Now, in the last two videos before this, we talked about statements of faith being obsolete and not being very helpful anymore. We talked about how we should conduct our own sense-making. But what we do is we take words and concepts and doctrines and we outsource them to Brother Melms. We outsource them to the denomination. Is the denomination always right? No. Is the statement of faith always right? No. Is your favorite theologian always right? No. What about your favorite collection of all your favorite theologians? Are they always right? No. So should we outsource our understanding of what concepts are and what makes them legitimate to anything else outside? Should you outsource your sense-making, in other words? So the church has outsourced its sense-making about marriage to the government to the point where when the government totally changes it into something that it's not, or if the government were to just stop doing it, Christians would have no recourse. Okay, say the government no longer, there's no more marriage, they're not recognizing as a tax code or benefit status at all. So now as a Christian, what would you tell people they need to do so that they're not committing, so that their intimate time together is legitimate and not fornication? What would they need to do then? I mean, before you could just go down and get a marriage certificate. Now you can't do that. Now what do you tell them to do? What do you do? And I'm not asking you because I don't have ideas. I'm asking you hopefully to get you to think. I hope you're not just shouting answers back. You should do this, this, and this. I hope you're not doing that. I hope you're contemplating this and thinking about the deeper question behind the question that I'm asking. And I'm not really just talking about the concept of marriage here. What I'm talking about is all the concepts that you think you know. Without realizing it, you have probably outsourced the repository of meaning for those concepts to something outside yourself, and you don't even realize it. A denomination, a statement of faith, Brother Melms, you don't even realize it, okay? By conducting your own sense-making, look at our last video. by conducting your own sense making and conducting your own epistemology and never advocating for ideas unless they are yours, you can start to identify what you have outsourced to other entities and start to retract and pull that back in. And remember, it's okay. It's okay to not have a position on something yet. It's okay to say, I have a lot of observations about this, but I don't have a firm position yet. I'm working on it, but I just don't have one yet. That's okay to be there, okay? And there are things to consider other than just what is strictly true. For example, when in the case of marriage, there is one thing, what is technically true and technically right. And then there is the concept of, will it offend a weaker brother if you act on that technicality? Will it do that? What's the perception? Now, you cannot live your life at the behest of everyone else's perception. You can't do that, okay? But it's something to think about. I knew somebody who got divorced and they could not remarry their person until I think 60 days later. But in the next state over, they could marry just 30 days later. So even though they're in one state and that state wouldn't let you marry in so many days, they went to another state and got married in just 30 days at the 30-day mark, and then came back and got married. And then they came back and got married at the 60-day mark in their current state. So during that 30-day limbo period, while they have the out-of-state marriage certificate, but not the in-state one, were they committing fornication for that 30 days? Think about that. Think about the strange things people do. That's strange. I know of another case where a man and a woman wanted to, they had both had spouses that died. Spouses, the plural, that would be spice, I think. Like mouses, mice. Right, spice. So their spice had died. I hope you guys understand that I'm joking, because some of you guys, you think I'm dumb when I tell jokes like that. But we'll say that their spice died, and then they wanted to get married to each other, and they want to have a ceremony and do it in church, in front of witnesses, sign a paper for the church, all this kind of stuff, but don't want to do a legal marriage certificate for the state. And some people have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. If you don't want the state interfering with what it recognizes as your legal, your pension and medical benefits and taxation status and all that kind of stuff, if you don't want that to change, don't involve the state. But that's just my opinion, okay? I think somebody like that they're following the spirit of the law, even if not the letter of the state law, and they're not doing anything illegal. There's nothing illegal about two people who aren't legally married living together, okay? And if they got married in a church, that's just and I know, who knows what I'm going to hear. And I'm not trying to convince you of what I'm thinking. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to provide an opportunity to think a little deeper about something, about what something is. And I hope that you take this and you apply it to other things that you hear. Are we saved by the blood? What's an inward call? That kind of stuff. What is that stuff? All these little presuppositions, all these little phrases that you see in the songs and in the hymn books, and you hear them preached, and you say them in Sunday school, and they're in all the Sunday school literature, and you just hear all these phrases and stuff all the time. Do you ever question them? Do you ever question where that sense-making came from and what processes led to that conclusion that somebody thought that made sense based on the evidence? Have you ever examined that? Have you ever thought about that? And I just hope that you do. That's all I'm asking. Think about those things. So if I were to ask you right now on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your understanding of marriage? Based on the beginning of the video, have you at least thought about something maybe that you didn't consider before? I hope you have. And I hope you take that kind of thinking, and I hope you saturate the rest of your understanding of what you think are biblical and moral and doctrinal concepts. Use some critical thinking. That's what I want us to do. We Christians are in an age where we can no longer afford not to be good epistemologists. It's time that we start knowing why we believe what we believe and stop advocating for things that we think we're supposed to believe but don't really have good reasons for. And you can see our last video for that. So I hope this video made you think a little bit. Thanks for watching. May the Lord bless you, and good day.